President Biden's huge infrastructure bill is finally nearing the end of the road. It's over 2,000 pages, covers wide-ranging infrastructure improvements, from roads to broadband. The package also includes funding for projects that would build up the country's climate change resilience.
Just make
Some
everything
climate change
solar and
experts
wind
say the
powered.
budget doesn't go far enough, and other analysis says
Just
the bill
do it
would
already.
not pay for
You
itself.
need to do it anyway.
Here to unpack the highlights on this and other stories
go ahead and start
is
doing
Umair
it.
Irfan, staff writer
less
at Fox,
expensive in the
based
long
out of
run.
Washington, D.C. Welcome back, Umair.
Gotta convert.
Thanks for having me back.
To green
You're
energy.
welcome. Let's talk about the infrastructure bill, first
Running for
proposed
decades.
in March. How is
Sooner
it
we do
different
it,
from what Biden
Not only
laid
do we
out
save money, we make
5
more
months
money
ago?
off
What
of it.
has changed?
Well, the big top line thing is that it's much smaller than what Joe Biden actually wanted. When he presented his American Jobs Plan, that rounded out to about $2.1 trillion. And this bipartisan bill that's being worked on by 10 Democrats and 10 Republicans, this is valued at about $1 trillion with only $550 billion in new spending. So there were a lot of concessions made, and some of those concessions were on things that were related to climate change, particularly on mitigating and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Although it does contain a fair number of provisions for dealing with the impacts of climate change, like adaptation. And so it has about $500 million to protect homes against wildfires, about $11.6 billion for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to improve flood control, and about $73 billion for power and infrastructure. But there were a lot of cuts on the things that would actually reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
So there was basically a compromise. Biden did not get everything he wanted
in
here.
the long run.
That's right. You know, Biden wanted about $363 billion in tax credits for clean energy that would boost the deployment of wind and solar power. And he wanted about $157 billion for electric vehicles and infrastructure. And that was shrunk to about $15 billion in this version of the bill. And there was also $556 billion in research and development funding that was also removed. But there is one key provision that does reduce greenhouse gas emissions that's still here, and that's the provision to deal with orphan oil and gas wells. These are, you know, wells that have been abandoned that are still leaking methane, which is a very potent greenhouse gas. And so by closing them off, they can actually get some outsized reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. And so there is still some